Do you think it's best to share the screen as people come in? What do we do usually?
I think we do kind of start sharing it just like right at the hour. I can,
Okay,
like, when it hits 9, maybe start sharing.
sure.
I pulled up the PowerPoint just from the Teams folder with today's date. That's like the most updated
Yeah.
PowerPoint.
hmm The only thing that would have changed would be just to make sure, I guess, that there's the 2 slides per key takeaway thing,
I will double check that.
that got added in, but otherwise, yeah,
Good.
yeah, should just be auto saving.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Do you prefer to have my camera on for sake of having more faces on camera or not?
Yeah, it's
So
nice. I think it's nice as people come in. Yeah, if you want to. But I mean, Mary's gonna be sharing screen pretty soon too. Maybe just until we get past that kind of first slide, that introduction slide, and then you can go camera off. Oh yeah.
and it's good because I am a genital fidgeter, especially towards the 3-hour meetings.
Yeah. Oops. Back with my coffee.
Well, that's a very handsome mug, Edith.
Thank you. Isn't that a great mug? It has a little cow
Yeah,
on
yeah,
it.
excellent.
It also has a lid. I don't know where the lid went, and I like it, but I don't ever use it for anything.
It just
This is
looks
why I
good.
can't find it. Yeah, I can't remember where when I moved back from France. There's a bunch of stuff I'd forgotten that I owned because it had been 10 years, and this was one of them. And I was like, "Oh, that's right, my cow." I was very excited to be reunited with it.
Among other things, I've got a whole set of very nice Tom and Jerry mugs from they're like union made from like the 80s back in Chicago with like half of my other belongings still, with no certain plans on when I'll recover them, but at some point.
Are we in a practice session or are we just in?
We're
jam
just
session?
in. We are in now. Hi, Christina. I think, Mary, if you want to start sharing the screen, that's great. And I think we're also going to give it a few minutes before we really get started, since it's first thing in the morning and people are probably getting their coffees and things ready. So we'll take it easy for the first couple minutes as people trickle in. Good morning, Eric.
So early I can barely find my mute button.
First meeting of the day on WebEx, no, nonetheless, right? So even more challenging to find the unmute button.
My son was at a track meet over the weekend, didn't get home until 12:30 a.m. So we're
Oh.
we're a little slow here.
Yeesh, that sounds tough.
Yeah.
We're gonna keep on waiting a few more minutes. Hey, John, good morning.
Hey, good morning.
We're just gonna chill and hold on for a minute while we wait for people to come to this early morning meeting. Hi, Edison. Good morning, Amber. Good to have you all here today. I'm gonna give it maybe 1 or 2 more minutes before we start. And then we're gonna get rolling. Even if it's a small group, we might be small, but we'll be mighty. Hi, Zach. Good morning.
Hi, happy to join you. Thank you.
Thanks for being here. Hey, Sarat. Good to have you here. I think I saw Jess join. Hi, Jess.
Good morning.
And Gabriella, good to have you here.
Good morning, folks.
Um, and I think we're gonna get started. And people may trickle in a little bit more. And if they do, I think we'll be okay as we go along. Let me just move my many screens around. All right. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Environmental Justice and Equity Working Group for the Oregon Energy Strategy. I'm Lauren Rosenstein. I'm the Community Equity and Inclusion Analyst at the Oregon Department of Energy. Instead of Oregon Department of Energy, you might hear us say ODO at certain points, so that's what we mean. I'm joined by Mary Kopriva today. She's ODO's economist, and Edith Bear, who's managing this project. Hugh Arsenault is also here. His work ensures that all of the comments and thoughts and chat that we hear are properly captured throughout the process. I'm very excited today for this kickoff. I feel like there were so many times during our modeling conversations that we kept saying, oh, that's a great idea. Let's come back to it during the policy conversations. And now we're finally here. We get to dive into those conversations. So let's get started. Next slide, Mary. Just as a reminder, this is ODO's mission and the what we do. So I'm going to read it out loud to ground our work together. Our mission, the Oregon Department of Energy helps Oregonians make informed decisions and maintain a resilient and affordable energy system. We advance solutions to shape an equitable, clean energy transition, protect the environment and public health, and responsibly balance energy needs and impacts for current and future generations. And what we do. On behalf of Oregonians across the state, the Oregon Department of Energy achieves its mission by providing a central repository of energy data, information, and analysis, a venue for problem-solving Oregon's energy challenges, energy education and technical assistance, regulation and oversight, and energy programs and activities. Next slide. We're using WebEx. WebEx is a little bit of a complex server. So with that recognition, here's a wild slide that tries to tell you everything you need to know about it. If you're a panelist, you can add comments and questions to the chat. There's also that tiny raise hand function at the bottom of the screen that you're welcome to use. Please do feel free to use emojis if you'd like to signal any agreement with people. If you disagree, you can start with an emoji, but we'll probably ask for a little bit more on that. If you're on your phone to come off mute, you're going to use *6. If you're having any technical issues, you can message Joshua Price or Stacey Heiberger. If your chat isn't working, you can come off mute so we can help. And if that doesn't work, please do email Joshua Price and he'll help get you set up. Next slide. So as a working group, we're here to elevate the concerns, barriers, solutions, and areas of interest within the field of environmental justice and equity to support the development of policy recommendations for the Oregon Energy Strategy. And to do that, we'll go to the next slide. We're going to look to these objectives that we're going to try to work through in the next hour and 50 minutes or so. We're going to build relationships with our fellow working group members. We're going to ground our work in shared definitions, discuss and unpack breakout rooms and topics, and identify key areas of focus for our next meeting. Next slide. To meet, thanks, Mary. To meet those objectives, we're going to move through this agenda. It's packed, full recognition. I'm going to really do my best to keep us on time. And knowing that there's a lot here, there's a chance that we don't get through it all. So I'm going to be okay with that. We might want to spend more time in a particular conversation. So if that comes up for you at any point and you say, whoa, I'm not ready to move on, you can put that in the chat or come off mute. And we can talk about shifting the schedule and potentially adding an ad hoc meeting like we did in phase 1 to continue. Next slide. Here's all of our working group members. Not everyone could be here today, and that's okay. We're recording it, and they'll be able to watch it and provide comments and feedback later. And of course, we're so thankful to all of you for sharing your time, experiences, and expertise with us. Next slide. To ensure we're creating a space for people to feel brave and share their thoughts, concerns, and questions, we're going to use these group agreements. These are the same agreements that we utilized in the previous phase 1 meetings. I'm going to read them out. If you feel that there's something missing, please go ahead and add it to the chat. Or if you think there's something that needs clarification, please do add it to the chat. We're going to honor the agenda or modify by agreement, like I said. Listen carefully, seek to learn and understand each other's perspectives. Encourage respectful, candid, and constructive conversation. Keep an open mind. Ask questions to clarify and understand why. Be open, transparent, inclusive, and accountable. Respect differing opinions. Seek to solve differences and find common ground. Be conscious of speaking time. Step back to allow space for others to contribute. Limit your side conversations, which it doesn't apply maybe as much here since we're in this virtual setting. And if you are able, I encourage you to come on camera while we're having our discussions. Next slide. So we're gonna, for introductions today, we're gonna take some time and we're gonna share our names, your affiliation, your pronouns if you're comfortable sharing them, and what a policy area that you're excited to talk about in just 1 or 2 sentences. And I am going to call people out based on the participant list. So Mary, you're welcome. Thanks for stopping to share. And again, if you're able to come on screen for this part, that's great. And I also recognize that screens can be exhausting. So if it's not for you right now, that's okay too. So to get us started, I think this might be in alphabetical order. So that's a little bit, y'all can think about that and as it comes to you. It starts with you, Amber. Are you ready to kick us off?
Absolutely. Good morning, everyone. My name is Amber Feist. I'm an enrolled citizen with the Coquel Indian Tribe. I serve as the programs director for the Northwest Native Chamber, and I use she, her pronouns. I also serve on the Portland Clean Energy Fund's High Road Advisory Council. I'm co-chair for the Coquel Tribe's Community Culture and Education Committee, and as well as work in just numerous different industries, you know, clean energy being one of them, specifically in workforce and contractor development. So there is a lot of excitement in kind of the, home space specifically for residential work, but I was able to join the grid and transmission work group was that last week? Maybe the week prior.
Can't remember anymore, Amber.
Yeah. So I am looking forward to learning more around, some of the policy work that's happening in electricity generation and transmission as well. So happy Monday, everyone.
Happy Monday, Amber. Thanks for modeling and kicking us off. I wanted to note that there are a couple folks here who I'm going to call on, maybe just one today, no, a couple, who are with the Oregon Health Authority, and they're going to be with us throughout the process as well. And they are our subject matter experts for some of the work together. So don't be alarmed when you see another agency in the room. And with that, Anahi, it's over to you.
Hello, good morning, everyone. I'm gonna turn on my video, but I don't know how I look because I just rolled out of bed and came to my computer. 9 a.m.
Live your life, totally fine. Live your life.
So good morning, everyone. My name is Anaí Segovia Rodriguez. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the Energy Justice Coordinator at Verde. What policy area am I excited to talk about? I don't really have one right now, but I think that once I get to a policy area that I'm really excited to talk about, I'll probably be raising my hand a lot and be talking a lot and have a lot of thought to share. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Good morning, everyone.
Thanks, Anahi. Good morning. I love that. Yeah, maybe it's going to unfold as we go, and you're just suddenly going to be like, that's the one. Christina, are you ready?
Good morning, I'm Christina Zamora. I'm the Executive Director at Klamath and Lake Community Action Services, she, aya pronouns. The policy area I'm excited to talk about is anything residential, rural, resilience, any of it.
Great, thank you. I think we're going to definitely be digging into that. Edison, I see you're on another call, so just pop into the chat and let us know when you're ready and we'll come back to you. Eric, are you here and ready?
Yes, I'm ready. I apologize, I got sidetracked.
No problem.
Yeah. So this is just an introduction.
Yep.
Yeah.
Just your name, affiliation, pronouns if you want to share them, and then a policy area that you're excited to talk about.
Yes. My name is Eric May and my pronouns are he, him, and I really, really, really apologize. I will turn off my Teams. I'm the Environmental Justice Mapping Lead at the Oregon Health Authority. I also lead the methodology team for the development of the Environmental Justice Mapping tool. So obviously the thing I'm most passionate about is environmental justice in Oregon.
Thank you so much, Eric. Gabriella.
Good morning, everybody. Gabriella Goldfarb, she, her pronouns, and I'm the Environmental Public Health Section Manager in the Public Health Division at the Oregon Health Authority. And Pretty broadly in these spaces, I try to lift a voice around having energy both maximize the health co-benefits for priority populations and minimize burdens for marginalized communities.
Thank you, Gabriella. Greer, over to you.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Can you hear me all right?
We can.
Okay, I'm gonna stay off camera because I'm sick. But good morning, everyone. Greer Klepacki. I use he, him pronouns. I'm the policy and advocacy manager at the Community Energy Project. I'm really happy to be here with y'all. I also, similar to Ani, don't have one particularly picked out yet. I'm excited to see what we explore, and I think similarly, like once I find something that I'm really excited about, I'll definitely be chiming in. So thank you for having me.
Great. Thanks, Greer. I'm glad you're here. Get some good rest. Take it easy as you need to today. Jess, over to you.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Jess Grady Benson. I'm the organizing director at Rogue Climate. I use she, her, or they, them pronouns. And let's see what policy area I'm excited to talk about. I'm really excited to talk about all of it, especially the intersections between environmental justice and the focus areas the other groups are working on, energy generation, residential, decarbonization, et cetera. Excited to work with all of you.
That's great. Thanks, Jess. I think that's going to be a big part of our kickoff today, so I'm glad we can get into it. John, it's your turn.
Right. Good morning. Thanks, Lauren. John Singh. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm policy manager for Spark Northwest. I am most excited about anything and everything energy resilience for communities on the front lines. Thanks.
Thank you. Appreciate that, John. Mark, over to you.
Oh, good morning. Mark Healy. I work on the Tribal Resilience Task Force for the Coquille Indian Tribe, and I am interested in the energy resilience too, especially about getting heat pumps and solar panels and efficiencies whenever people want to add them to their own houses, and that's what we're kind of working on in the task force.
That's great. Thanks, Mark. I'm hearing a lot about resilience today. That's good to know that that's where people are interested in conversation. Sylvia, good morning. Your turn.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. I'm Sylvia Tanner. I use she, her pronouns. I work for Multnomah County Office of Sustainability. And I think the policy area I'm most interested in, I think my passion is, trying to collectively figure out how low-income Oregonians can access the energy they need and can access the benefits of the clean energy transition, and trying to fit that into the 4 buckets, I think, or 4 or 5 policy buckets of discussion that we've identified in prior sessions. I think DER and energy efficiency, maybe, if the top of my head is how I remember that bucket, that might be the most closely aligned with that objective. Thank you.
Thank you, Sylvia. That's great to hear. And Zach, are you ready?
Hi.
Hey, Zach.
Hello, Zach Mulholland, contract with Beyond Toxics in Eugene, and primarily focused on low-income electrification.
Thanks, Zach. Appreciate it. Edison, I'm going to see if you're there and ready, but if not, no big deal.
Good morning to you all, and my apologies. I'm listening at the same time trying to conduct other call. Edison Elise, I am with Confederate Tribes of Warm Springs, similar to Mark and Energy Sparks, or Sparks Northwest, sorry. I'm really interested connection of this committee with the other work groups that's going on, especially on generation and transmission side, and really trying to better understand how we can set policies that the marginal communities, low-income communities can also take advantages of it. and happy to be part of this team and the other work groups the best possible. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Edison. Thanks, everyone. Really appreciate that feedback and getting a sense of what people are interested in diving into. And we're going to do our best to create that cross-section and find those intersections with all of the other work groups. Mary and I are working to go to all of the other working group sessions to really listen in and hear what we can there and bring it back to our group. And of course, I encourage y'all, if you're interested, to go to the working groups that you're curious about to participate. And if you need more information on that, we're going to get to it at the end of our time together, but I'm also going to send up a follow-up email with dates and times in case you want to get signed up for it. Okay, with that, we're going to hop back into the slideshow, into our, and I got to move my screen around again. So I want to ground our time a little bit with some shared vocabulary. This is both for us as a working group, you as panelists, and then there's also some guests who listen in. And so I want to make sure that they also are working from the same definitions. So when we use environmental justice, we're relying on the definition from House Bill 4077, which is equal protection from environmental and health risks, fair treatment and meaningful involvement in decision-making of all people, regardless of race, color, national origin, immigration status, income, or other identities with respect to the development, implementation, and enforcement of environmental laws, regulations, and policies that affect the environment in which people live, work, learn, and practice spirituality and culture. And the definition of environmental justice communities broadly includes communities of color, communities experiencing lower incomes, communities experiencing health inequities, tribal communities, rural communities, remote communities, coastal communities, communities with limited infrastructure, and other communities traditionally underrepresented in public processes and adversely harmed by environmental and health hazards, including seniors, youth, and persons with disabilities. I also want to recognize that the intersectionality of climate justice, social justice, and racial justice. I'm going to kick us off with a thought from Shalonda Baker's Revolutionary Power and Activist Guide to the Energy Transition. And she says that climate change fundamentalism is the tendency to focus myopically on climate change mitigation at the expense of social justice concerns. She goes on to say, quote, "To make these changes, the laws and policies enacted to facilitate the energy transition must make explicit reference to issues of racial and economic justice," end quote. So it's our hope and goal that in our work together, we analyze or regard where there is climate, environmental, and energy injustice to note explicitly who is being impacted, what are the effects, how can we measure that, and from there create policy recommendations that answer those questions and hopefully lead to action that corrects the disproportionate impacts to environmental justice, disadvantaged, marginalized, and frontline communities. And to do this, I'm going to ask that we examine our work together through the lens of procedural justice, distributive justice, and recognition justice. Distributive justice, and I'm going to read these out as I understand them through the literature and courses that I've taken, but I'll also say that if there's something that you have a different definition or you're curious to hear more about, please do add it to the chat at any point. So distributive justice, which refers to the spatial aspects of energy. And this includes how energy resources are distributed geographically, as well as the distribution of the benefits and risks associated with energy production and use. Energy resources aren't equally distributed across the state. Different types of energy sources are not distributed equally, and the infrastructure that we develop to harness those resources is not equidistant from all communities. So we might ask, how do we make sure that rural communities are not unfairly burdened by the physical placement of a technology? Or are the benefits of a technology, such as the energy itself and any financial incentives, equitably distributed across urban and rural communities? Then we move into procedural justice that says all groups should be able to participate in decision making and that their decisions should be taken seriously throughout. And this principle is about process and participation. So we're asking ourselves, how do we make equitable decisions about energy and who's at the table when the decision is made? How can we include equitable decision-making processes in policy recommendations? And while procedural justice calls for all groups to participate, recognition justice works to understand and meet the needs of vulnerable, marginalized, and frontline communities to make sure that certain groups or cultures don't dominate the conversation. So again, we can look at the state's definition of environmental justice and think about how policy recommendations may affect those groups of people and how to include people with those identities in the decision-making process. One way to meet that recognition justice and procedural justice, because not everyone is in this room with us, I encourage you all to have conversation with your organizations and your communities, and then bring those additional perspectives and considerations back to our group. And again, if there's a definition that you prefer or something you'd like to add, of course, add it to the slide and I can adjust this for future. And with that, we're going to spend the rest of our time talking about and unpacking the key takeaways, identify barriers. If you were in one of the other working groups breakouts on the 12th, you can share some of those, key takeaways that you heard or other areas of concern or barriers as we move forward. And then it could also be that there's something else that you've already been thinking about that you'd like to bring into the space that is more than what was heard during those conversations on the 12th. We are going to be utilizing the barriers that we identify moving forward so that we can start building our next meeting times together. So this is how we're going to co-create our time together. Next slide. And as an example, this is just a glimpse of where we're going, and we'll have something similar for each of the other working groups that we can look at as the Environmental Justice and Equity Working Group. This is an example matrix of what we're working toward. This one's from the Transportation Electrification Group. And so like I said, today we're going to work on identifying barriers and creating issue statements. Next time, we'll discuss strategies to address those barriers. And in our third meeting, we're going to get even more specific as we think about what policy actions the group would recommend. Mary and I are going to work on populating these matrices, bringing them back to you so that you can look at them, sending them out to you also beforehand so you have time to really, take a look and share them with your communities and organizations and potentially bring back more ideas that we can work through as a group. Next slide. To organize our thoughts today and so that we can keep track of them, we're going to be utilizing a Miro board. In case you were unable to access the board with the link I emailed or haven't gotten in there, Josh is going to share that with all of our panelists now so that you're able to, the link so that you're able to access it. I appreciate that there's guests in the group today. I'm going to ask that only the working group members, the panelists, participate in adding to the Miro, and other folks are welcome to utilize the comment portal for any thoughts they would like to share. If you're unable to utilize the Miro board, like if you're on your phone, for instance, it can be really challenging. So you're welcome to just add your thoughts to the chat, and Hugh, the lovely note taker that I told you all about before, he's going to help capture everything so that we can get it onto the Miro board and into the official notes later. For our Miro activity, we're going to have about 3 minutes to think and add to the sticky notes, and then we'll spend somewhere around 15-ish minutes, maybe a little less, maybe a little more, depending on the areas of interest, to chat and discuss openly. And then each time we finish with one of our quadrants, just keep your Miro board open because we're going to be going in and out of it a few different times. As we're going through this, I'm just going to name these buzzwords. I'm just going to put them into the ether so that you can maybe start thinking about them and how they might roll out as a barrier to you. So they are consumer behavior, cost affordability, infrastructure, supply, demand, stock, siting facilities, community and environmental impact, efficiency, residential, commercial, industry, agriculture, transportation, resilience. Just a few, not a finite list, but just something to think about. So we're going to go to the next slide, and we're going to start with our very first other working group for the key takeaways for transportation electrification. So these are the key takeaways that came out of the model. The first is transportation electrification reduces system-wide energy demand and the cost of decarbonization, and the pace matters. Second, transportation electrification will significantly increase electricity demand, but electric vehicles can provide a net benefit to the grid if managed flexibly. Third, reducing vehicle miles traveled has a large impact on overall energy demand and therefore costs for maintaining and upgrading the electric grid. And fourth, low carbon fuels play a role in decarbonizing transportation across all scenarios, and that role increases as the pace of transportation electrification slows. So next slide. So how can we examine this? We can examine those takeaways through these topics: light, medium, and heavy duty zero emission vehicles, battery electric and hydrogen fuel cell, charging and fueling infrastructure, and vehicle miles traveled reduction. So just take a second, think about if any of these stand out to you. If you have clarifying questions that you need answered before we get into the Miro board, and where do you see barriers? And I'm going to turn it over to Edith. I also should have said, sorry, at the very beginning that Edith is going to be monitoring our chat for us today. So if you have any clarifying questions in this moment, I'm going to pass it over to Edith and check to see how the chat's looking and if anyone wants to come off chat or mute, excuse me.
Lauren, I'm not seeing, Zach Mulholland is asking to please email the Miro board link. I'll just say it's also been pasted into the chat, but we can certainly email it to you, Zach. And just letting you know, Lauren, that Kim Tam from OHA has joined. She previously accidentally joined as an attendee.
Hi, Kim. Good to see you. Welcome. Did you want to, before we go on, do you want to do a quick introduction? We just said our names, organization, pronouns if you're comfortable sharing them, and then if you're interested in a particular area of policy.
Thanks, Lauren. Kim Tham, I use she, her pronouns. I'm with the Oregon Health Authority. We're here working with Gabriella and Eric, and very interested in all your justice process and community resilience. Very interested in the health co-benefits of energy policy. So yeah, thanks for having me.
Great. Thanks so much, Kim. Really appreciate it. Okay, I'm not really seeing anything in the chat. So if everyone could go into the Miro board, and Zach, I see that you're asking for it to be emailed. Josh, I'm hoping you're able to email that to Zach right now.
I just pasted in our internal Odo chat Zach's email. So, oh, great. Thank you, Josh. It's been sent.
Thanks, Josh. Okay, everyone who's in this Miro board, I see cursors moving around. I'm going to bring everyone to me. So you're about to get moved to where I am. Zoop. There you are. So you should be seeing a box that says frame 1. It says using Miro. This is a longer explanation if you need any help with anything. The main thing I want you to know is that to move the screen around, do you see on the left side of the screen at the very top, actually I guess it's the second, there's the little arrow. If you select the arrow and you come off of it and it is an arrow, you will click and you'll move things around. If you want to move yourself around, you'll click that arrow and it will show as a hand. And then you can click and drag yourself to another area of the screen. Does everyone feel comfortable with that? Or I guess, does anybody not feel comfortable with that? If you don't, let me know and I can give a little more information about that. Okay, and then for this next part, you don't need to worry about creating Post-it notes for yourself. We've got Post-it notes already here. I'm going to bring you all to me again. So you're going to move over here to the key takeaways transportation electrification zone. To click on a sticky, you'll become an arrow again. So you'll click that arrow to make sure that you're showing an arrow. You'll double click on a sticky and you will be able to type into it. So that's my test there at the bottom. If you like what I say, you can click it and then you'll see a little smiley face that says add emoji. If you like it, you're welcome to add an emoji. If it's not your favorite, you could add an emoji. That way you don't necessarily have to retype everything that somebody else is saying. So with that, we're going to take about 3 minutes. Actually, let me make sure first that everyone's feeling comfortable and confident with using this Miro board. And again, if for any reason it's not working for you, you're welcome to just use the chat instead, and we can populate for you. So for this part, we're identifying any issue statements or barriers for transportation electrification. Does this work for everyone? Okay, you are welcome to start adding to the Miro board. Sorry, Jess, I just saw what you wrote into the chat. I didn't have it scroll down far enough, but issue statements can be thought of just as the barriers, like what will make it hard to do this work? What are the things that are challenges, that are obstacles, things like that? Cool.
Lauren, there's a question here on whether you can clarify what you mean by issue statements.
That's what I just did and came off chat for.
Okay.
But if there's further questions about it, let me know. And I noticed that we started our timer a little bit later, so I'm going to give us just one more minute. I'm starting to see a lot of the stickies getting filled up, so take one more minute. Okay, I'm gonna have us stop there. I see some great stuff in here, a couple of stickies with some emojis about federal funding, Elon Musk, political impacts, things at a federal level, inconsistent federal policies. So I'm seeing a few things there. Is there anybody who wants to come off mute and say a little bit more about that? I know it can be tricky switching from screen to screen. But Edith, if you could, I don't know if you can see if people have hand raised a little bit more.
Yes, I can, and I see Jess just raised.
Thanks.
Yeah,
Go for
thanks.
it, Jess.
Thanks. Yeah, I think just to elaborate on the Elon Musk piece, that there's just so many political threats that are wrapped up now in this issue, which I think already had culture war dynamics attached to it. And now we're seeing really dangerous authoritarian behavior and oligarchical behavior by Elon Musk. And so I think that will further create cultural barriers for people to make the transition to electric vehicles, in addition to raising concerns about the impacts of lithium batteries on mining, on indigenous lands, on indigenous sovereignty. And so I think those pieces feel both separate and connected.
Yeah, thanks so much, Jess. I really appreciate how you're really talking about it at a large, that 20,000 foot view, and also bringing it into a very local place. Thinking about that, culture war and how that's going to unfold is really interesting. And I think maybe also what I'm hearing is that a barrier is the unknown. There's just a lot that we don't know right now, and that's really challenging. Are there other folks who'd like to come off mute? And you don't have to necessarily see anything about the federal funding piece. You can also speak to something else that you've written on a different sticky note.
Lauren, I see Zach's hands up. Zach, why don't you go ahead?
Hi, I think the biggest barrier from my perspective is the lack of incentives. The EV incentive program last year ran out of money after, I think, 2 months. And so if we're actually looking to incentivize low income electric vehicle uptake, we actually need the money to last throughout the year and not run out immediately. I'm not sure I agree with the key takeaways that are listed here on transportation electrification. I think it really is going to come down to EVs, and so that's my 2 cents. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Zach. Really appreciate that. And I think, the key takeaways are what the model gave us. And I think that, the model is moving at the least cost pathway. And if you want more, I don't know if you were able to go to the conversation. I think you joined our group a little bit later, but there's a really good recording from January 31st where we presented at OMSI that I'll share back out with folks again. And then a meeting that happened on the 12th, February 12th, that kind of went into how all of this came to be. So just a little bit on that, and also with full recognition that our conversations may move a little bit away from these key takeaways like you've just said, and that's okay. We can explore those as well. And to your point about incentive programs and running out of money, I think that that's a barrier that we absolutely will be able to move through and keep addressing as we do this work together and get into more of the solutions and then finally the policy recommendations. So thanks so much for bringing that up, Zach.
Lauren, I see several hands up, but it doesn't tell me who raised their hand first. I'm just going to list the folks who raised their hands, and I apologize if this is in the wrong order, but I see Mark, Sylvia, John, Eric, and Emma.
Yeah, just one quick thing. Before the new administration, it was hard for homeowners to go through all of the grants and incentive programs. And now it's going to be a lot harder because a lot of them don't exist anymore. You know, Solar for All maybe is on the edge. CPRG is, you know, been suspended for now. But it was hard for anyone to go through the maze of programs. And I don't know how Odo can help, but it would be nice if there was some way to simplify it, maybe using the CPP, like the Seating Justice might help distribute that funds, something like that.
Great. Thank you, Mark. I appreciate that. I think figuring out access of programs is a really important part and something that we should definitely talk more about. Great barrier and area to bring up. Thank you.
And I have Sylvia, do you want to go next? And Amber, I've added you to the list now as well. I see your hand has come up.
Yes, quickly, and moving away from kind of programmatic things, but there's a couple things that came to me. I'm not a transportation person, but one is, you know, charging a home, and a lot of what I hear the benefits, you know, like I have a old EV that I just plug into my wall at, you know, residential rates. That's available to me because I have that. Like I can just plug into my, like, plug in the thingy. But if you charge in the commercial stations, you're facing much higher fees. And so anyone who's doesn't have the plug in front of their house, that's the reality they're facing and the math that we need to make. And so I know that the key takeaways and the modeling is looking at the system-wide benefits, but I think that I would love to see, and I'll probably repeat this throughout the conversation, like a future iteration of the energy strategy where we're trying to understand better more individual impacts. And I know the energy wallet, as I understand it, tries to get to some of that, but I feel that we need more work, and hopefully we get authorized more work for a future iteration of this work, this strategy work. And then the second thing, this is something that my former coworker, Knowledge Murphy, just kept bringing up when we talked about transportation electrification. And he said, look, like he was talking about his experience working with African-American families in the region. And he's like, some families are big and they don't fit in the leaf, right? Like the cheap EVs are tiny. The bigger EVs are very expensive. And so for him is that, you know, like, well, we have a real solution to like the realities of people. They just felt like pie in the sky to him. And so I should not be characterizing, I mean, I might be mischaracterizing what he said, but that's something that he kept bringing up a while back when we still worked together, and something that I think we need to continue to keep in mind in terms of realizing this goal of having more of our transportation fleet be electric.
Thank you so much, Sylvia. I really appreciate that and bringing it in, and, you know, really also hearing what other people are saying and bringing it into the space. That's really helpful.
John, do you want to go next?
Yeah, thanks. First of all, just second what Sylvia said about multifamily, you know, folks living in rental homes. I've experienced that myself. It's pretty tough to convince a landlord to get your charging infrastructure set up. And you can use like a 120 volt normal outlet, but like in my case, we've had to try and convince the landlord to fix the electrical system so the grounding works on the outdoor outlet. So it's just like little things that aren't immediately available. And then if you have a bunch of people all trying to charge their car at one multifamily home, that can pretty quickly overload the system. And then another thing is the dealers and like, I don't know, anything where you're like stacking tax credits and rebates and all that gets really confusing and weird really quickly. And there's also the chance for, a dealer to basically just jack up the prices and then pocket the tax credit for themselves, and nothing really stopping them from doing that. And unless you have tons and tons of time to research all this stuff, you might not even know that dealers are taking advantage of tax credits that are intended to be for helping people buy EVs at a better price.
Thanks, John. I'm hearing there a little bit also maybe around consumer protection in general that we need to discuss at large. Yeah. Thanks, John. Eric, you're next.
Yeah, it really kind of like tag on to like what everybody else is saying with regard to economics. It's economics. If you want to set up like a rapid charging station at your home, if you're fortunate enough to own a home, a lot of older homes only have 100 amp panels. Looking at $5,000 to upgrade the panel, another $2,000 for this station. That eats up your incentives if you're fortunate enough to get those incentives. There's also an inconsistency across, who's providing your power. There's really great incentive programs from Portland General Electric. Pacific Power, they're almost non-existent. And so even for a middle-class family, if you're into a project for $7,000 before you even make the purchase of the vehicle, it can be pretty overwhelming.
Yeah. Thanks, Eric. Yeah, I'm hearing too about, consistency across the state in that statement and needing to take a look at that maybe as well. Thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah, it's just, I think the inconsistencies in what incentives are available are a really huge hurdle, and we've heard a few people mention that already.
Yeah, it's great to bring up. And the good news is that in meeting number 2, we're going to dive a little more into economics. So I think we're going to be able to. I think it sounds like we're on similar pages here. So I think it's going to roll out well. Anahi, you are next up.
Yeah, the thing I wanted to bring up, so I put the EV being unaffordable even for low income, even with subsidies and all that for low income families. So Verde is located in the Cooley neighborhood in North Portland, and a lot of the outreach we do when we talk about electrification, what that looks like for the future, which could mean EV cars and stuff for families, that is never in their idea of a future car. Like there's so many needs that they cannot meet with their income that buying an EV car is just so out of the realm of a possibility for them. And that's such a big barrier to, becoming to going to all EV. And the other thing too is a lot of the communities we serve are renters, and as some folks have already said, it's really expensive or it's really hard to convince a landlord to try and change their mind on chargers. And even for those lucky few who do have a home, it's incredibly expensive, I think, as Eric was saying, to buy a charger, upgrade a charger, So it's not just, oh, I buy a car, it's I have to get a charger. I don't know how to do this. I'm like, if for example they're non-English speaking, I wouldn't even know how to recommend a first step to them on where to go, who to talk to. Do you talk to the dealer? Well, dealers are known to be scummy, as some people have said they've taken advantage of the incentives, the subsidies. I would know, and I speak English. Where do you go? Probably look online. I don't know what Google would recommend. So there's already that barrier there. And it's just so far out of the realm for like truly people who are barely able to pay their utility bills on time. And I can't imagine being like, oh, you want an EV? Okay, well, you will have to pay for gas. Now you have to pay for a higher energy bill, and you're already having a high energy bill in the winter months. So that's just some of the things that I've kind of noticed and when I've talked to and spoken with some of the community members in North Portland. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you. I think those are great points to bring up. And I think that almost everyone in the group gave you a thumbs up or a plus or an applause. So high agreement with everything that you just said. Navigating the system, as Christina added to the chat, is really challenging. There's a burden there with having to do that. Also noting that I think who said it, I think Greer said in the chat also that the education piece is huge. So just full recognition that there's quite a lot of agreement. And I think this is something that we're really going to need to dive into. Amber, you are going to round us out for this part of the conversation. Please go ahead.
Thank you. And to be clear, I want to talk a little bit about workforce and development of, installing EV charging stations, and also kind of how that looks in tribal communities that are looking to develop, more microgrid interconnection. So I think I might actually save my longer term comment for when we kind of move into transmission. But yeah, I agree with everybody here. And I think that there are some, great opportunities for policies around just like individual vehicles, but yeah, there are like a lot of workforce challenges and economic opportunities that are really limited across the state for people that are wanting to get into the actual charging infrastructure.
Thank you, Amber. I appreciate that. I think you all have brought up some really great points and filled in a lot of the post-its there that we'll be able to really use to build out the matrix that we'll work on and bring into our next meeting as well. So I really appreciate it. And I'd say too, that as you're thinking about these barriers, not that we're moving beyond barriers today, but just to start that, internal thought process of, if this is a barrier, what does a solution look like? And, at this point in time, you can think high in the sky, right? Like we're just brainstorming. So just kind of keep that rolling. At this point, we're going to go back to, oh, sorry, I see Zach's question. The state was talking about a one-stop shop to learn about available rebates. And will that cover EV rebates? I wonder if Ruchi, do you know the answer to that question? I'm not totally sure if you're on the line right now. If we don't have that answer, Zach, I'm going to get back to you on it.
Lauren, hi. I don't have the exact answer, but I'm pretty sure that the one-stop shop is covering more energy efficient technologies and energy efficiency type upgrades, and not including something like an EV charging. But that's a great parking lot item to put on there.
Perfect. And we'll put into the chat also we're calling it the HIPPO, very affectionately, which stands for, it's an acronym, so it's really just about those incentive programs. And so we'll drop that into the chat so that we can explore it as well. So we'll find that out for you, Zach. Okay. For now, let's head back into our PowerPoint, Mary, and we're going to head toward building efficiency, electrification, and DERS. And here's the 4 key takeaways that came out of the model. The first is delayed energy efficiency and building electrification represents the highest cost of all scenarios that were modeled. Building electrification results in system-wide reductions in energy demand. Rooftop solar in Western Oregon reduces the need for grid-scale solar to be built in Eastern Oregon. And demand response programs reduce future capacity and transmission needs. So the next slide, how do we look at this? We can examine those takeaways through residential and commercial and the customer side of the meter. So are there things that stand out to you? Again, what questions do you have and where do you see barriers? And I know some folks were excited to jump into this part of the conversation. Again, if there's any clarifying questions, happy to answer them now before we go back into our Miro board, which I'm not seeing anything. Edith, do you see any hands raised?
I don't see any hands or questions directly related to the TF you just designed.
Oh,
I think we
okay,
can-
great. Perfect. Okay, I'm gonna bring everyone to me, and we are in the building efficiency, electrification, and DERS area. You'll see that the key takeaways are on the side, and we'll spend about 3 minutes just brainstorming, and you're welcome to add to the stickies, and we'll come back to have another discussion.
Edison, your hand just went up. Do you have a follow-up question?
You sure did. Oh, sorry. Thank you for that. Great discussion so far, and I really like the areas that was mentioned, and we put that part of our strategy. One thing we need to keep in mind, given the type of a load growth we are seeing, in addition to the residential commercial area, we are seeing huge demand for data centers and AI load. And in order to meet those type of a demand, utility scale solar or other renewable resources are definitely needed. We need to also not lose sight of that, and the connection between environmental justice and equity in regard to that area, and how it connects to the other work group in regard to the generation and transmission infrastructure required to meet our zero carbon goals and so on. It needs to also, I believe, should be mentioned as part of the building blocks of this work group. Just throw that out for discussion if everybody would like to have that. But I do see a connection from that perspective as well. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Edison. Appreciate you bringing that up and into the room. And I think that's something that we can definitely make space for. We're going to have there's 4 different kind of categories that we're working with, and there's the distributed resources, and there's also some of the transmission conversation that I think I'm hearing you pull on that thread a little bit more. So I think we'll be able to get into it for sure. Thank you. And I see that the timer so gently gave us a little ding ding that we're ready to build on the conversation here for building efficiency, electrification, and DERS. And I need to zoom in so that I can actually see. But are there things right away that are jumping out to people that you'd like to come off of the chat and bring into the room? Or if there's anything that folks would like to say to talk about with Edison, you can bring that up as well. And Edith, again, it's hard for me to see the hands, so if you wouldn't mind just jumping in when you see them.
I will. I'm not seeing any hands quite yet.
Yeah, might take a minute. Everyone kind of needs to look and see what all the other sticky notes say. I'm seeing some similar things here about incentive programs running out of money. We saw that in the vehicle transportation electrification sticky notes. Yeah, I'm seeing here too that the Oregon energy strategy should include a more human lens, and right now it feels really dry. And I think that it's I think that's a really great point that, you know, the model is dry. It's inputs and it's outputs. And one of the things that we chatted about during our modeling conversations was really being excited to have policy conversations so that we could bring the humanity into it, which is way more than inputs and outputs. So happy to have that comment and looking forward to hearing how folks want to address that.
I see Anai, your hand is up, and then after Anai, I also saw Zach's hand go up.
Thank you.
Yeah, Lauren, to your earlier question about like some of the things that I noticed, like kind of an overall theme here noticed is like, yes, incentives, and then the other was community engagement and workshops about the I also put, for example, myself, Verde has a team called Verde Builds, and when we engage with the community through them, sometimes renters and homeowners that we engage with don't know the importance of building efficiency and how important that is. And partly it's because, you know, again, they're trying to survive. That's not at the forefront. They're not thinking like, I need double paneled windows. They're thinking, how am I gonna feed my kids this week? And so engaging in the community that does have capacity to think about things like that. And then also I wanted to really uplift something I saw here was it's a housing issue. Housing is just an issue, and renters don't have that control over this situation. A lot of the times I used to live in a low-income housing apartment for 17 years of my life. I had mold. We had reported it multiple times. And all I did was get paint over. And that was my life for 17 years. And I had zero control over it. I didn't know how to fix it. My parents didn't know how to fix it. And so that's something else I've really heavily wanted to uplift, is a lot of the times they have no control over that situation. And we see it all the time too in North Portland when we go into homes to install ductless heat pumps or cooling through the ACs through the Cooling Portland program. That was something we ran into, was getting permission from the landlord. Sometimes it was no.
Thank you. I really appreciate you elevating that. And I'm seeing that Greer is agreeing with you in the chat, talking about a renter's lack of control. Sylvia also talking and agreeing. I'm seeing lots of pluses. Christina talking about it. I'm seeing quite a bit also, I'd say, about that educational piece that you've talked about, Ani. And so just as a reminder, I think that's a great thread when we're talking about a policy recommendation, you know, to think about what does that educational component look like within policy? And does it also mean that there needs to be more work done at a state level to understand what those educational resources and then how we roll those out, you know, just kind of thinking about it broadly. So I know we're not, again, not getting to solutions, but I'm really hearing that education piece. And then also, again, it sounds a little bit almost like consumer protection. It's a little different, but there's something similar there that's striking me. So I think it's great to bring up. Thank you for doing that. Zach, we're going to go to you, and then John, and then Eric. So take it away, Zach.
Thank you. Following up on that point, here in Eugene, about half of the rentals that got home energy scores got a 1 out of 10. And so that dealing with that split incentive issue where the landlord usually is the one to pay for the upgrades, but it's the renter that saves money. So a minimum standard there to ensure minimum efficiency would be very, very valuable. Agreed that, yeah, any incentive programs need to come with education, both for low-income households, but also for the contractors that are going to be offering those rebates. And then similar to the EV piece, lack of available incentives. The rental heat pump deployment program ran out of money in a single day. The community program ran out after, I think, about a month here locally. And tied to this is that we're also incentivizing the wrong things. So Energy Trust is currently subsidizing gas systems in Eugene, which directly, it's directly, we should be getting that money to help people switch over from gas, not encouraging them to stay on the gas system with that money. And that's all. Thanks.
Thanks, Zach. So I think it's a great barrier to identify, and I think you've really clearly kind of created a pathway toward a solution of where maybe you think that focus could go, what that policy recommendation could look like. So I appreciate that. Thanks for naming it. John, you are up next.
Wanted to echo on how this is a housing justice issue, and I think we really miss that when we talk about this stuff strictly in the language of efficiency and weatherization and electrification. And those can keep it in the realm of dry energy stuff away from like the same stuff we need to do to electrify a house and make it more efficient is also a way to alleviate mold and holes in the roof and all that stuff. And then I was working on a PSEF funded solar install recently, and we worked with a lot of really well-meaning folks who didn't have a whole lot of experience working with communities of color or families experiencing low incomes, and there were some pretty, uncomfortable or awkward moments that turned some people off to the idea of getting solar, because you're going into someone's home and inspecting things and looking around you're really in somebody's space, and you should you need to have some cultural competence going into that sort of situation. So yeah, some training for installers and contractors could go a long way, I think.
Thanks, John. Yeah, I think looking at that through the lens of, workforce and how workforce is moving through and being trained not only in installation of new technologies, but that cultural humility piece is really valuable and important as we're doing this work, and also intersects with the idea of education as a whole. So I think it's a great couple of points to bring up. So thank you. Eric, over to you.
Yeah, so we provide opportunities for cooling systems for low income housing because it's an environmental justice issue, right? With climate change risks and extreme heat increasing, it's really something we have to do. At the same time, you know, those are used during peak hours, and you know, it's got to be like kind of a modeling nightmare to, you know, see the requirements start to, you know, tick up. You know, at the same time, you're trying to, you know, lower the amount of use on the grid. So you know, I think, you know, kind of what John was saying, you know, like needing to, you know, couple energy efficiency in homes along with, you know, providing those cooling systems. I think, you know, we can't lose sight of that they really need to go hand in hand.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. I think thanks for lifting that up. And it's something that I also noted. I didn't say anything about it, but John and Eric, to your point, that there is some collaboration or intersectionality or overlap between agencies and the work that we're doing. And so thinking about, you know, who's holding what is something to really consider as we're moving through this. And Greer, I see you have plussed, Sylvia, you've plussed some comments. Christina, I see in the chat you've written, there's also a need to train community members in energy efficiency that are a part of the community they are serving. I'm wondering, do you want to come off chat and say anything more about that?
Yeah, that was kind of to add on to the comments around being culturally sensitive when you're in people's homes. I think doing some workforce development, specifically in energy efficiency for marginalized community members, it'll help them increase their income. People will be more comfortable when they're going into their homes. They won't be making inappropriate suggestions to people of different cultures. So I think that is huge, and that could really be leveraged with the education piece as well. And teaching people, this is how you use your new equipment. This is how the heat pump works. It's not going to blast heat like a resistance furnace would.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's a really great point. Appreciate that. Edison, I see your hand is raised and you'll round us out for this part of our conversation. Please go ahead.
Sure. I just wanted to, as I'm hearing the discussions in regard to the community and community outreach and education, majority of the utilities through their Public Utility Commission in Oregon do have certain programs that they get cost recovery from the commission on those. Is this a possibility to also intersect the information and the programs that all utilities under, I hate to call it mandate, but again, it's part of their cost recovery for these type of the programs. Some do it really nicely. Some hardly even reach out to the community for these type of programs, but somehow we need to find out rather than putting it all on OE, is it others that we should also target for, if you will? And I hope they are part of the discussions or will be joining this type of a work group that we can get more educated. But being an old utility person working for investor-owned utility, we had those type of programs. Again, certain areas is much more advertised, much more community engagements. But when you go to the marginal communities and others with the lower income and all that, either they don't ever spend the time for those communities or the interest is not there at all. Anyhow, somehow there is an intersect that we need to also acknowledge. Thank you.
Thanks, Edison. Yeah, I think it's a great point about just, you know, where are we bringing in our educational materials and where are we building meaningful engagement and really recognizing where those gaps are and how we can start to bridge those gaps. And I think that's something that's a a great barrier to identify now and to think about what those solutions can look like in the future. And Christina, I see you plussing that engaging the IOUs and leveraging their efforts is a great idea. So I'm hopeful that we'll be able to kind of move into that solution-oriented thinking in our next meeting. Thank you so much. With that, I'm going to move us into our third section. Mary will start sharing the screen again. And we're going to head into developing clean electricity generation and transmission. And I know this was an interest that was identified for quite a few people when we were doing our check-in. These are the takeaways that were the outputs from the model. So the model shows significant near-term load growth. Both in-state and out-of-state resources contribute to a least cost supply portfolio. Oregon does not have sufficient physical transmission capacity to meet the modeled electricity flow. The model consistently builds more generating capacity. Decarbonizing Oregon's electricity may require more policy action. So, how do we look at this? Through electricity generation and storage in front of the meter. We look at transmission and development needs and barriers, competing priorities. So we're gonna be able to dive into this transmission conversation now, which I think again is of interest to quite a few folks here. Are there any clarifying questions for this one? I'm not seeing anything in the chat. Edith, are you seeing any hands raised?
Just toggle back and forth one more time. No, I don't see any hands raised. No.
Okay, great. We're gonna move into I'm going to bring everyone to me again real quick so you are set up with where you need to be. We're in the developing clean electricity generation and transmission. Key takeaways are still on the side, and we're going to do the same thing. We're going to take 3 minutes to brainstorm so that you can fill in the stickies, and then we'll have some discussion. Okay, that is our time for this one. While y'all are kind of taking a look here and gathering thoughts, I'm seeing here a couple of comments and some thumbs up around needing to prioritize the voices of tribal communities, rural communities, frontier communities, the difficulties and barriers that are very specific to those locations. I'm also seeing about community benefits, maybe community benefits plans. And as a reminder, in the federal funding grants through the Justice 40 initiative, which was an executive order that has been removed, community benefit plans were a part of those. And so maybe a barrier is that those don't exist at the federal level, and is it possible to create them at a state level? Just some food for thought. So while folks are doing that, Amber, I know that you were interested in in this discussion when we were first chatting, and so I'm wondering if you would like to kick us off.
Yeah, thank you. I think what I was really kind of leaning into is just the fact that in a lot of rural and tribal, because tribes are in rural areas, there isn't a lot of workforce opportunity and training into actually working within the grid, maintaining, building. You see a lot of challenges, especially in whether that be, the electrical union or getting kind of those advanced level certifications can be really costly, and they have to kind of leave their areas in order to go and receive that training. And I think that's kind of like just one big challenge, as well as really looking at the companies that are actually equipped to do this large scale grid work. I think as you kind of see in the key takeaways, a lot of the issues are going to need, to have our state really look at grid enhancing technologies, because we're not going to be able to replace the entire grid. And so how is the state going to be prioritizing not only which initiatives are going to be prioritized, but also who are the companies that are going to be doing that work, and how are we looking at creating our local economies and generating dollars within excuse me, not only just our region, but also within our state, especially when we have large scale infrastructure projects that are kind of on the horizon for us to be doing. I think that plays also into tribes really wanting to lead in energy generation and in a lot of the microgrid creation. And, as they kind of move forward through those really technical processes without kind of, direct technical assistance that's provided by either state or utility partners, there's a lack of knowledge, but also a lack of cleared pathways for people actually getting connected into the grid. And so, when you look at what now have been sunsetted, but large federal, grants or loan funds to be able to allow tribes to do this work. There isn't partnerships with whether that be the state or the utility partners to really kind of allow tribes to leverage some of those federal funds that can be brought in. We'll see what happens in these next few years, but I think it's something that we really missed out on, and that it needs to be a part of the policy work that ODO is doing in terms of figuring out how to partner with tribes and communities that have those federal resources to be able to tap into.
Thanks, Amber. I really appreciate you uplifting this conversation. And I would say too that, with some of the federal funding either sunsetting or freezing, that this is a great place to say, if it's not existing there, and can we create something at a state level? What is the recommendation at the state level to ensure that is happening? So, I mean, you said a lot there. You got some applauses that I saw come in. I think Edison has said some similar things. And actually, Eric, I know your hand is raised, but before I come to you, Edison, I'm curious, because you've said some similar comments. I'm wondering if you'd like to respond or add anything at this point.
No, I think Amber summed it up very well, and we do need to get that connection going. apologize, don't want to get into the political discussions, but it makes me wonder whether the current administration will continue to support some of those programs directly for the tribes, question mark. And that's something we need, as time goes by, we will learn more about it. But connecting those with the community and with OD and all that should be part of our strategy discussions. Then I'm 100% in support of what Amber said.
Okay,
Thank
thank
you.
you. Eric, your hand is up. Go for it.
I should be down now, but no,
Oh, sorry.
I actually had a question, around House Bill 4077 and, the language written around supporting small scale renewable energy projects. I think I can find the answer to my question, which is how's that going? But I think it's available in the modeling report. And I didn't really make the connection or think about it until this exercise came up.
No problem. Edith, do you want to say anything?
I don't have anything off the top of my head to add on House Bill 4077. I think I'll just flag it, Hugh, for you because you're taking notes and you've been tracking everything to check and see if that is in the materials that we've posted online, because we've posted quite a few materials over the last week. I'm not sure that it is, and if not, then it's just something for internal discussion. Thanks, Eric.
Oh, thank you.
Cool. Is there any other hand raised this moment? There's a
If I can just add one more thing.
please.
I kind of mentioned it in another one of the areas, but I think, whenever I kind of see that there is a lot of strategies around demand response programs, I'm also, I'm just cognizant of the fact that the fire map was recently released, and a lot of we just see our fire danger continuing to rise. And as we're looking at demand response programs and we're looking at electrification, there's a lot of communities that, they rely, on heating and cooling. And as we're making this transition, it's just really important to note that what are some of the risks associated with that, especially for disabled and elderly communities, and how are those being prioritized if we're looking more at DERs and incentives, and how we can really continue to just respond to, just what this transition looks like and what it's going to mean for our people.
Yeah, thank you. And I think you're getting pluses in the chat right now. And I think, the wildfire stuff specifically came up in phase 1, which Amber, I know you weren't able to join, or you weren't in those conversations, but they're not included. Wildfires are not included in the modeling or in the geospatial analysis or the air quality analysis, but I think it's an important conversation to have. So, again, that's that part of us bringing the humanity into the conversation. So thank you. I see John and Sylvia have their hands up. Sylvia, I know you just plus, so I'm wondering, John, is it okay with you if we pop over to Sylvia for maybe something to add on?
Please. Go for it.
Okay, great. Sylvia, take it away.
Oh, I was going a different direction.
Oh, she's gonna change it up.
No. I mean, it's all related, right?
Yes.
I'm not surprised that the model's telling us that we're gonna need significantly more transmission, that we're gonna need significantly more generation. That's consistent with what we're seeing in the carbonization models, throughout. I am worried about that. No, because I don't think it's important or necessary, or because I agree with the model, but I'm worried about, Oregon has this very strong history of land use protections, and very efforts to have siting conversations have been hard, and like I got to sit in one of those, and it was there's a lot of feelings around that, but I'm especially worried about the US's history and this region's history with the energy system and energy infrastructure, and just like trampling over folks who are perceived at that point to have the least political power, the least resources, etc. That really, really worries me. I've seen and like this coming and, coming from the renewable energy advocacy space, which is my past history, my past job years ago. And now sitting in this moment where we know we finally kind of come together to accept that in order to decarbonize the grid, we'll need this massive build. I'm really worried about our industry or our space's ability to not trample EJ communities, which is what we have historically done. And I'm worried about that based on what I know and what I've seen. I just don't really trust us sometimes to like have the decency to not repeat past harms. And I don't really know, I don't really know how to go about it. Like, I don't really know what are the boundaries that can be put, but I would like to see in the energy strategy report some like kind of cautionary messages around that. Like, yes, we need to do this. Yes, we need to expand, but also how do we not repeat harms? Because this is like, we have projects today in the Pacific Northwest, right, that are repeating harms. And it's a risk. And when you have kind of the structures and incentives in place that we have, and the lack of these incentives, is just a worrisome combination for me.
Thank you, Sylvia. Yeah, I 100% hear what you're saying, and I'm gonna introduce something at the kind of toward the end of our meeting as an idea that I think might get a little bit to what you're saying here. So, just a note to say 100% yes, and I am excited for the conversation maybe as we wrap up and in the future around that. Thank you. John, over to you.
Yeah, thanks. And totally second all that, Sylvia. I was thinking about microgrids as we're talking about this. There's a nice package of bills to support community ownership of microgrids that's moving through the legislature right now. And I think they're an awesome resource for communities that are at the end of the transmission line, both to meet demand during normal times and to provide resilience for when disaster strikes, which is increasingly the case. And the utilities really don't want communities to own energy resources because it cuts into their profits. But there's so much to be gained from allowing communities on the front lines of the climate crisis and providing incentives and financial support for that sort of resource that, I think if you're really looking at the whole system with clear eyes, utilities will make all these arguments about, it's shifting costs onto other ratepayers who don't have these resources. And I think we need to just be really vocal about how pushing back on that argument, because they're building their own microgrids that the utilities own, and they're not doing anything to reduce costs to other ratepayers of those projects. So how are you going to say that customers and communities building their own resources is shifting costs? Thanks.
Thanks, John. It's a lot of really good stuff right there. You got a handful of thumbs ups too. So definitely some agreement, and something obviously that we'll need to get into more as we go along. Edison, I'm going to wrap this section up with you. Go for it.
Thank you. I apologize. I may be having a little bit of a different view to what John and I think Sylvia was mentioning. Not that I'm not in support of the microgrid and continuation of those efforts in that area for the communities, but is an acknowledgement that we need to bring up and hopefully agree on, that if we want to have a resilient system of power system, our infrastructure is old. Bonneville Power Administration's major power lines that supports the Northwest region, they are hitting 75 to 100 years of lifetime. And the growth that we see, when you think about Portland General areas in Hillsborough, and the amount of data centers that being introduced all over and so on, those amount of the load increases, unfortunately, does require additional infrastructure of power lines and generation. How can we marry the microgrid type construct in combination with those That way, both are critical elements to serve our resiliency needs. I am 100% for it. But to be honest, just focusing on one without the other, we are kidding ourselves if we think with microgrid type construct, we can take care of the energy demand of the population within the state as well as within the region.
Thanks, Edison. John, I see you nodding your head. Is there anything you wanted to add real quick?
Yeah, just I appreciate that, Edison, and I fully agree that we need a both-and approach there. To me, it's more just making sure that for communities that want to do microgrids as an option that's available, while fully understanding that more transmission is critical as well.
Thank you. I appreciate that conversation. John, also note that Sylvia has a question for you specifically in the chat. I'm not going to read it out. It's just to you. Okay. With that, I'm going to move us into our fourth and final piece around low carbon fuels. So here are our 4 key takeaways from the model. Demand declines, but fuels remain a significant component of Oregon's energy system across all scenarios. Low carbon fuels are an increasing proportion of Oregon's energy supply across all scenarios. Firm, dispatchable resources are needed to support the growing electric grid. Electrification is more cost-effective than adopting low carbon fuels in many applications. So think about that, and what that means is, where you can go to the next slide. Opportunities, we're going to be looking at opportunities for low carbon fuels in buildings, industry, and transportation, and identification of barriers and potential solutions to production and distribution of fuels. So we're going to head back over to our Miro board, and I didn't set myself up quite right for this one. Let me scooch us over to our final zone in low carbon fuels. I'm going to bring you all to me. Here we are. And again, I think, Josh, if we could do 2 minutes for brainstorming on this one, I know we're getting a little close to our time together. So we'll do 2 minutes for our brainstorming, some conversation again, and then move into a wrap up. So let's do 2 minutes. Okay, that's our chime for this one. I'm seeing more here again around community education and controlling misinformation. Maybe that goes again into some protection stuff. Let's all just kind of take a second here to digest what other folks have written down. And if something comes to you, if you want to expand on what you've written on your sticky note, or if there's something else that you'd like to bring forward that you see on somebody else's sticky note, please do raise your hand so that we can have those conversations. I'm also seeing some stuff here about prioritization of which communities receive resources over others. And I think that, you know, that to me speaks across the board, right, around prioritization and where has that been in the past. And I think Sylvia speaks a little bit to what you were saying in the previous statement, and how we can move forward in a different way that maybe is more inclusive than what we've seen in the past in the state. Is there anyone here who'd like to elevate a comment, a barrier, a concern, ask a question? Maybe people want to just kind of digest this one. Also, I know we're getting to the end of time and starts to be exhausting to participate a lot. I'm seeing some comments in here also about false promises, false solutions. Happy to chill for a minute, see if anyone has anything to say. And if not, that's okay too. We can move on to the next portion of our time together. I'm curious, maybe as a question, if there's any concern around production of fuels in the state. Is there any concern around hydrogen production? Are there any barriers or issue statements there that people are thinking about? I think I saw something on hydrogen.
I see Zach's hand just went up.
Great, go for it, Zach.
There's a bill in the Oregon legislature to require disclosure when hydrogen is proposed to be flowing through natural gas systems. I think that we have seen very, very big promises on a transition to a hydrogen future that I don't think that the promises made are being kept and that they are infeasible, but they are being used as a reason to delay more cost-effective electrification measures and are being sold to the public and to elected officials as a viable solution when the modeling shows that it's likely the most expensive solution. Thank you.
Thanks, Zach. Appreciate that. I see Edith nodding her head.
I also see, and I guess this is a question for us, Lauren. Sylvia's saying she doesn't know enough about low carbon fuel production to know if there are concerns. And I think that this is something that I think is probably more broadly shared. Just the low carbon fuels discussions are around stuff that's nascent, not yet happening at scale. What does it mean? Where would it go? So I think that I might flag that one up for us to think about whether it's one that we could elaborate on in a little more detail to give an idea of a better idea of what we're talking about.
Yeah.
To help service more responses to.
I think it's a really good point. Thanks, Sylvia, for bringing that up. I think that this is, if I'm being honest, this is the area where I also know the least and maybe have the most confusion. So let's have the Odo team. We can, discuss more about how to support this conversation in this group. And Michael Friels, who is the lead and the facilitator for the low carbon fuels group. I'll chat with him too, and maybe we can discuss better approaches so that we can help to bring some clarification. And maybe Michael can even join us.
I just wanted to add to the point that Sylvia also put in the chat here about availability of clean electricity to produce that green hydrogen. We have a scenario that where that happens at quite a large scale, and there's a pretty big increase in electricity production required, including in the state, to kind of to meet the needs in that scenario. So there is some information in the modeling that we did, and I think that the purpose of that is to tee up this kind of discussion. So I would say that it is something that we flagged, but we haven't really gotten into in the discussions yet.
Cool. Okay, I think I'm gonna pause us here for this particular portion of the conversation. We only do have 10 minutes left. There's a couple of closeout pieces that I want to get to. But I think that this was an awesome brainstorming session. I really appreciate that y'all kept that list of barriers coming and that we focused on barriers, even though I know that I personally, when I hear a barrier, I often want to go right to a solution-oriented mindset, and it's hard to sit in the barrier sometimes, but here we are. Y'all did a great job of it, so thank you very much for that. We're gonna pop back into, it's so hard. We're gonna pop back into our next steps here. And we can just go straight to the next slide. So Sylvia, this is a little bit of what I was talking about before that I think might help support some of what you were talking about. This is from the Washington Department of Commerce. They, for their energy strategy, developed key actions, in quotation marks, including communities, in quotation marks. So they brought community into the conversation and addressed it in the report as a chapter that's titled Build an Equitable, Inclusive, Resilient, Clean Energy Economy. And this particular chapter provides context, examples, and this 7-step process for building equity into clean energy policies. I think it's a really valuable resource to read before our next meeting. I think it's about 6, maybe 5 or 6 pages. It's got visuals also, so it's not like a full dense six pages. But I'll send that out to everyone in the wrap-up packet that I send out with some resources for y'all to take a look at. And then with the question of, are people interested in this working group in potentially contributing to and or developing a similar foundational material for the Oregon energy strategy? And maybe you need some time to think about what that would look like. Maybe we want to have a different conversation that focuses on this. So I'm just going to open it up for a conversation for a second here to hear if anyone has an initial reaction to this. And sorry, Edith, I can't see hands again. So if you could help me with that.
On the lookout, I haven't seen any quite yet.
Okay. Okay, so what we might do there is just, I'm going to leave it. I'm going to send you all the resource. Yeah, and Christina, I see your comment that this could keep everyone on the same page and provide important definitions. I think that grounding work, the definitions, making sure that there's a commitment and a focus within equity and specifically environmental justice, using that House Bill 4077 language could be really great in that definitional work. And then also, again, Sylvia, just to kind of bring forward what you were saying, that there's these very definitive pieces that maybe, you know, there's a specific policy recommendation, but we also want to acknowledge on this larger, wider, higher lens, you know, that this is maybe something that we need to consider across the board and with regard to what has happened. So where have we been? What are the harms that have been made in the past and continue to today? And how can we move forward? So again, something to think about, and we'll talk about it more. All right, Mary, we can head to the next one. So here are the dates and times for our meetings. And as always, if you want an additional meeting because you feel like we didn't get to dig in enough in a certain conversation, or something comes up and y'all have talked maybe with each other and said, ooh, I actually think we need an hour to talk about this. That's totally fine. Let me know and we'll see what we can do. Our next meeting, we're going to be diving into strategies to address barriers, specifically the barriers you named today. I'm going to work on getting them into those matrices so that they're a little more bundled, putting like comments and barriers together so that we can really focus. And then, as I said before, Mary and I are going to be going to the other meetings. Some of y'all might be going to the other meetings as well. And we're going to try to bring back more of what we hear. Mary and I will also be working with the other working group leads and facilitators to gather what they're saying and bring it here so that we can discuss it. And of course, please do, discuss and share what you've heard here with your organizations and communities so that we can continue to build the conversation with more voices. And then we can go to the next slide. Here are the other working group meetings. If you're interested in any of them, just let me know and we'll get you the invitations. And then for the next slide, we're going to be holding some office hours to answer any lingering questions, and I'll send you all this information, which includes a what's the word I'm thinking of? A calendar hold, so that you can have it on your calendars and participate. Each one of these office hours has a specific topic with it that correlates with our working group themes. So this also might be a great place to bring the fuel questions to be able to understand a little bit more. I know I will be attending that one. We can go to the next slide. And then these are just additional meetings. So we are going to be having a public forum listening session. That information went out, but I'm also probably going to share that resource with y'all so that you can send it to the wider communities that you work with. We're also going to be hosting the presentation of the complementary analysis. That's the energy wallet, geospatial mapping, and air quality. So we'll be able to dig into that and see what that analysis tells us and how we want to bring it into our conversations. And then we are currently also working on the job study, which is another complementary study, to see how that workforce analysis can build on these conversations as well. It's really just we're stacking functions. And then finally, there's a couple other resources here. I think Hugh, I saw put into the chat the January 31st final modeling results presentation and recording. That's one that could potentially be helpful if you wanted to watch something really specific about those key takeaways that we talked about today, that you could fast forward to that particular area to understand how that modeling worked, and then bring questions to the office hours or bring more thoughts to here, and always with the recognition that a model is missing the human. So, put your lens on top of it and think about what it could look like. And then second to last, actually, I think I said last on the last one. That was third. Now we're at second to last. Please do provide written public comment. Again, Hugh is taking, by Amber, is taking all of the comments in and really creating a great system for us to understand them. And for those who are watching, who are not panelists but are guests here, please know that you are welcome to provide written public comment at any point. Okay, now final. Mary has been working very hard with the other working group leads and facilitators on creating other resources and educational materials that go a little bit more in depth with some great visuals for each of the other working groups. So those are going to be coming out. I sent y'all the low carbon fuels one. So take a look at that. If you missed it, no problem. I can attach it to the next email. You're gonna get, I guess, like a pretty solid packet of resource information from me for your next email. And again, I'll send these out to you as they become available. And that wraps up our time today. Again, I can't thank you all enough for coming and participating. I know that, we're getting into some tough conversations, and your full participation and engagement really means a lot to the process. So I thank you for your time today. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Bye. Okay, bye.